So people often ask me, what's the right amount of screen time for children? Well, that's the wrong question.
So why is it the wrong question?
The term screen time leaves us with very few other places to go. Because as soon as we ask how much screen time is right for a child, all we're doing is actually thinking about this sort of black and white situation where it's either this amount or that amount. And it means that ever since we started thinking about the idea of screen time, which historically came out of a 1992 policy paper from the American Pediatrics Association, it means that we've seen screens as a negative thing. So the concept is, well, how much of this screen is my child allowed to actually have? And what that means is that all the other possible questions and other things to talk about don't get discussed, and they never have been discussed very well. And we're only just beginning to do that, which is to people say, well, how many different types of screen time are there? What's the difference between watching television by yourself as a 4-year-old or having your parent watch it with you? What's the difference between having World Wrestling Federation on the television at our house 24 hours a day, just being there constantly for a child to see or have access to, versus watching some quality children's programming that's been developed in conjunction with early childhood educators? And we don't have those conversations. What's the difference between touching a screen and the agency that comes from a child around making choices or having some control over their media consumption, or even creating some of their own media through taking photos or doing their own little video, versus sitting down and watching a television show that someone else has produced? Now, all of those types of screen time are very different. And what we really need to actually be asking is, how do we best use technology and screens to support children's learning and development? And our obsession with screen time means that we don't actually get there. And it's not to say that screen time and managing that's not important. It's not to say that a child should have unlimited access to screen time, but the discussion around how much and what that looks like should come after the fact of, well, what are we doing that's good? And what does that look like? And that's why I say that early childhood educators have a responsibility. We need to begin to introduce technology into our early childhood environments so that we can observe, so people that are experts in childhood development can actually say, oh, I saw them do that and this is good. And I understand why developmentally that is good, or I understand how the child learned something from that. But over here, when they used the screen in that way, that wasn't really good, or that had a negative impact and we shouldn't be doing that. And it's people who understand how children learn and develop that need to be the ones that help us to work that out. There's researchers doing that, but there's nothing better than on the ground, lots of anecdotal evidence that builds up to say, here's what we know collectively as a community that's interested in raising capable and confident young children. We know that screens are used as tools for babysitting or respite, and that's okay sometimes, because within the context of a life, if someone's parenting 3 children and you're trying to get a nice healthy dinner ready, that spending a bit of time on screens is probably better than you just going and buying some fast food in terms of the holistic model of that child. But it's also to say to them what the content that's actually on that device, whether it's a phone or television, matters, and to have some good quality content that they can. And some of those things are available online from different places, like there's people beginning to curate those types of things. And it's also to say to parents, spend time on devices with your children. Because for me, that's one of the biggest problems that we have, that we spend time alone on our phones or on our tablets or on our computers, or we put them in front of children to spend time alone on them. But there could be a whole bunch of dynamic and interesting things if we did them together. And it would also teach and share with parents their understanding of how a child engages with screens and with technology. And it's when they're doing that, that's when they'll be able to start to go, oh, that's enough now. Because they will be engaged with their child. They will see when their child is beginning to be stressed by the experience, or when it's becoming too absorbing, or when it's having an effect on them. And they will begin to intuitively understand what enough screen time is for their own child. Because the type of screen time it is and the context in which it's being experienced should dictate how long a child should be spending. It's really good to have some rules, and it's rules for the household, it's not rules for the children, and it's rules that parents should abide by as well. When children are younger, it's a lot easier to manage, but the reality is a lot of young children are living in households with children who are 8 or 9 or even possibly teenagers, and having good discussions about where screens live in a house, setting up the parameters really early. We know that computers and televisions in teenagers' rooms are really not a good thing for sleep or for their overall health and well-being. So make sure you're on top of that early. Make it so that screens in your household are never used in bedrooms, and that's adults included. You know, if that means you have to buy an alarm clock rather than using your phone's alarm, well then that might be the case. There's so many different things to go into in a way, like having a set charging area, having a place technology lives. You might want to be a household that is like, well, no phones at the dinner table. Again, parents, children all included. Or it might just be that we have device-free spaces. Rooms are device-free spaces. Or we might have the fact that, well, telephones all live in one spot when they're at home and we don't just carry them around in our pockets to access all the time. But it has to be what works for your family and how you operate and what's important for you. It doesn't, you know, there's not one. It's problematic when we get evangelical about this stuff. It's problematic when we start to say, it must be this, because we're all different and parents all come from different places and children all have different experiences. So what's most important is the discussion and the planning and working out what works best for our family and for our children. And doing that as parents, being guided as best we can by early childhood professionals and those who understand, you know, the best ways to support children's learning and development.
If you liked this video, then click subscribe for more.